Hello बच्चों, welcome to Hello Biology. This is the 12th lecture of chapter Principles of Inheritance and Variations. Students, today we are going to learn an important topic from genetics called pedigree analysis. In this topic, we will understand how a particular trait or genetic disorder is inherited from one generation to the next by studying a family tree. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to read pedigree charts, identify inheritance patterns, and solve pedigree questions with confidence. So let's get started. Now, students, let's understand what pedigree analysis actually means. Pedigree analysis is the study of how a particular trait is passed from one generation to the next within a family. Instead of studying a single individual, we analyze the entire family history using a special diagram called a pedigree chart. By studying a pedigree chart, we can trace the inheritance pattern of a trait through multiple generations and determine whether the trait is dominant or recessive. It also helps us understand how genetic disorders are transmitted within families. In simple words, pedigree analysis is like creating a family tree for a genetic trait to understand how that trait is inherited over generations. Now, students, let's understand the meaning of generations in a pedigree chart. In a pedigree chart, each horizontal row represents a different generation of a family. We label these generations using Roman numerals. Generation 1 represents the oldest members of the family, usually the grandparents or ancestors. Their children belong to Generation 2, and the children of Generation 2 belong to Generation 3. Similarly, the next rows represent Generation 4 and Generation 5, showing how a particular trait is passed from one generation to the next over time. So whenever you look at a pedigree chart, remember that each row represents one generation, and moving downward means moving from parents to children and then to grandchildren. A pedigree chart is a tabular representation of a family chart, showing the transmission of a particular trait or disease. Now that we understand generations in a pedigree chart, let's learn the meaning of the symbols used in it. In a pedigree chart, a square represents a male and a circle represents a female, while a diamond represents an individual whose sex is not specified. If a symbol is completely shaded, it means that the individual is affected by the trait or genetic disorder. Sometimes a person may not show the disorder, but can still pass the gene to the next generation. Such individuals are called carriers, and they are represented by special carrier symbols. So, by looking at these symbols, we can easily identify males, females, affected individuals, and carriers in a pedigree chart. Students, let's learn a few more important symbols used in pedigree analysis. First, if a square or circle has a diagonal line drawn across it, it indicates that the individual is deceased. The symbol still represents a male or female, but it tells us that the person is no longer alive. Next, a single horizontal line connecting a male and a female represents a marriage. This line shows that the two individuals are a couple. However, if the male and female are connected by two parallel horizontal lines, it represents a consanguineous marriage, which means the marriage is between closely related individuals, such as cousins. These symbols are very important because they help us accurately interpret family relationships and inheritance patterns in a pedigree chart. Students, let's look at two more important symbols used in pedigree analysis: fraternal twins and identical twins. The first symbol represents fraternal twins, also known as non-identical twins. These twins are born at the same time but develop from two different eggs and two different sperms, so they are genetically different from each other, just like normal brothers and sisters. The second symbol represents identical twins. These twins develop from a single fertilized egg that later splits into two embryos. As a result, they have the same genetic makeup and look very similar to each other. So remember, fraternal twins are genetically different, whereas identical twins share the same genetic information. These symbols help us correctly identify twin relationships in a pedigree chart. Now, students, after learning the different pedigree symbols, let's understand how to read a pedigree chart correctly. In this diagram, The individuals at the top belong to Generation I, which represents the parents. Their children are shown in the next row, called Generation II, which represents the offspring. Notice that the children are numbered 1 and 2 using Arabic numerals. These numbers indicate the order of birth. Here, child number 1 is a boy and child number 2 is a girl. A very important point to remember is that Roman numerals are used to represent generations, whereas Arabic numerals are used to identify individual members within the same generation. So whenever you look at a pedigree chart, first identify the generation using Roman numerals, and then identify each family member using the Arabic numbers given below the symbols. That's all for today's class. I hope you enjoyed. If you found this lecture helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more biology content. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in the next class. Goodbye!